Creak. The heavy wooden door, with an ancient sound, slowly spread open, as if it carried a breath from the distant past, pouring out and enveloping the area. Let's go in and take a look. Mu Chen's eyes gleamed as he gazed at the slowly opening door of the Spirit Treasury Hall. A hint of passion flickered in the depths of his gaze. He then flashed a slight smile at Luo Li and Wen Qingxian, and with a swift motion, he appeared outside the entrance of the Spirit Treasury Hall. Standing there, the ancient aura rushed towards him, giving him a strange, dreamlike feeling, as if he had returned to ancient times. The door had now fully opened, and greenish light spread layer by layer. Within that light, a powerful vitality lingered in the air. Mu Chen carefully stepped inside. After his foot settled, feeling no immediate disturbances, he finally relaxed and began walking forward. Behind him, Luo Li and Wen Qingxian followed cautiously. Spiritual energy rippled around them, clearly on guard. Beyond the door, a corridor stretched out, bathed in greenish light. Mu Chen and the others advanced cautiously under the glow of the light. The corridor wasn't long, and soon they reached the end. Their visions suddenly expanded, and an expression of astonishment spread across their faces. Before them was a large pool floating mid-air, its waters a vibrant green, radiating vitality and a terrifying spiritual energy fluctuation. Plop! Suddenly, the green water splashed, and a school of small, green fish swam out from the pool, their tails swaying as they moved through the air. These fish, entirely green and glowing faintly, appeared incredibly lively. However, Mu Chen and the others felt an extremely pure and powerful spiritual energy emanating from them. "Where's the supreme spiritual liquid?" Mu Chen asked in surprise, staring at the green pool with his face twitching. Could it be that this entire pool is filled with it? Are you dreaming? Wen Qingxian gave him a side glance, then extended her slender finger, pointing at the little green fish swimming through the air. These are the supreme spiritual liquids. Mu Chen gaped in shock, staring blankly at the little fish. He looked as though he had never seen such a thing before. Of course, this was his first time seeing supreme spiritual liquid. By its literal meaning, it should be a liquid, right? So why had it transformed into little fish? Only supreme-level beings can refine supreme spiritual liquid. The spiritual energy within it is not only pure, but also contains a trace of sentience. Of course, this trace of sentience depends on the strength of the refiner. Some higher-quality supreme spiritual liquids even possess the ability to transform. Luo Li smiled and explained. Generally speaking, the higher the quality of the supreme spiritual liquid, the larger the form it transforms into. I've seen one drop of supreme spiritual liquid personally refined by a heavenly supreme over the course of a year, and the object it transformed into was so large that even this entire Spirit Treasury Hall couldn't contain it. Upon hearing this, Mu Chen couldn't help but click his tongue in admiration. The supreme level was truly beyond his current imagination. No wonder the entire Great Thousand Worlds viewed this level as a huge dividing line in cultivation. Below the supreme, all are ants. These supreme spiritual liquids are not easy to collect, Wen Qingxian said, her gaze fixed on the little fish swimming playfully in the air, but her expression grew serious. Collecting them is troublesome? Mu Chen asked, surprised. You think just walking into the Spirit Treasury Hall and swiping your hand will let you collect all these supreme spiritual liquids? Wen Qingxian ruthlessly shot down Mu Chen's naive thoughts. Supreme spiritual liquids contain a trace of sentience, and in some ways, they possess immense power. While this power won't actively explode, they will instinctively avoid capture. So, trying to catch them is no simple task. No wonder it's called supreme spiritual liquid, Mu Chen murmured. But after hearing Wen Qingxuan's explanation, his curiosity was piqued. He grinned, eager to try. Then let me give it a shot. With that, his figure blurred, and he shot forward. His figure flashed by, and the emerald spirit fish that were once leisurely swimming scattered in panic as though startled. The moment they scattered, their incredible speed was immediately displayed. Mu Chen could only see streaks of green light flickering through the air, unable to catch sight of their bodies. Such speed! Mu Chen was also taken aback, but quickly, the dragon shadow beneath his feet appeared, and a dragon's roar echoed. His speed surged instantly. Boundless spiritual energy surged from his hands, forming a spiritual energy palm that shot out like lightning, swiftly grabbing one of the green streaks of light. Boom! Boom! The little fish, trapped in his hand, began to thrash wildly, its small body crashing against the spiritual energy palm, creating a deafening noise. Mu Chen's spiritual energy palm trembled under the impact, almost shattering. Such strength! Mu Chen's face turned serious. After personally experiencing it, he finally understood just how difficult it was to subdue this supreme spiritual liquid. And this was just a tiny drop. If he had blindly charged in and grabbed a handful earlier, he might have been injured by the shock. The spiritual energy palm continued to shake, and Mu Chen immediately focused his energy, using black and white spiritual power to reinforce the defense, as if engaging in a stalemate. This stalemate lasted for several minutes, until the trembling finally began to subside. Mu Chen flicked his sleeve, and the light palm disappeared, revealing the emerald spirit fish, which had transformed into a translucent drop of liquid, as clear as jade. The drop of liquid was so beautiful that it was hard to look away. Within that tiny drop, it felt as though a world was contained, and the shifting light was intoxicating. Mu Chen extended his hand, and the drop of supreme spiritual liquid hovered in his palm. He could sense the terrifying spiritual power contained within it, stronger than all the spiritual energy in his own body combined. But this power wasn't offensive. It was pure, yet subtly infused with a touch of sentience, mysterious and incredible. This is supreme spiritual liquid, Mu Chen murmured, deeply shocked. This was the result of an entire month of refinement by a supreme powerhouse. It was their masterpiece. From this, he could feel the kind of otherworldly methods wielded by such a figure, a realm Mu Chen greatly yearned for. How is it? When Qingxian appeared beside Mu Chen, smiling playfully. It's indeed hard to subdue. Mu Chen nodded, glancing regretfully at the emerald fish drifting in the hall. With so much supreme spiritual liquid, it seems we won't be able to fully subdue it. Be content, Luoli smiled lightly. She understood the value of the supreme spiritual liquid, but wasn't overly fixated on it, knowing it was all in vain. Mu Chen smiled. Since that's the case, let's get started. As for how much supreme spiritual liquid we can collect, it depends on our own abilities. Don't worry, I'll leave you far behind, Wen Qingxian said proudly. Is that so? Mu Chen smiled. How about a little competition? Wen Qingxian challenged, her lips curling into a sly smile. If you lose, you can't have any physical contact with Luoli during the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition. Mu Chen and Luoli were both taken aback by her odd request. Why does your bet concern me? Luoli said unhappily. And if you lose? Mu Chen raised an eyebrow, remembering Wen Qingshuan's constant provocations. He sneered, then his gaze swept over her slender, alluring figure. Noticing his gaze, Wen Qingxian didn't get angry. Instead, a charming smile appeared on her stunning face. She stepped closer to Mu Chen, placing a delicate hand on his shoulder. If I lose, you can do whatever you want. If you fancy me and want me to offer myself to you, we can discuss it. Mu Chen teased her but then grabbed Luoli's hand. Luoli is much more beautiful than you. I'm not doing any bad deals. You're asking for it. When Qingshuan's expression darkened, her eyebrows shooting up, the gentle hand that had rested on Mu Chen's shoulder suddenly slapped out with full force. Haha. Mu Chen laughed loudly, his figure swiftly retreating. He leaped into the air, his gaze fixed on the emerald fish drifting through the hall. If you really want to play, I'll play along. Let's forget about the bet, though. As his voice fell, he directly sat cross-legged in midair, with black and white spiritual energy swirling around his body, emitting strange waves. You talk big. I'll see how you intend to defeat me. When Qingshuan's nature was already proud, and she often compared herself to Mu Chen. Hearing such words, she couldn't hold back anymore. With a cold snort, her graceful figure moved, appearing in midair. Her jade-like hands gently closed, and dazzling golden light spread out, layer by layer. Luo Li looked at the two people, one on the left and the other on the right, starting to use their abilities to compete, and she couldn't help but shake her head. She then also sat cross-legged in midair, placing the Luo god's sword on her knees. A faint sword intent quietly emanated as she began to prepare for action. Inside the ancient Great Hall, vast and pure spiritual energy waves rippled one after another, causing the entire space to show signs of turbulence. Mu Chen, Luo Li, and Wan Qingxian each sat cross-legged in midair, occupying different positions. Powerful spiritual energy spread from their bodies, clearly signaling that they were ready to truly engage and capture the supreme spiritual liquid. Mu Chen's expression was heavy. After the previous testing, he understood the overwhelming power of the supreme spiritual liquid. If they had offensive capabilities, Mu Chen would not dare to show any interest, because the spiritual energy contained in each drop of supreme spiritual liquid was far stronger than all the spiritual energy in his body combined. After all, this was a spiritual object refined over a long time by a supreme powerhouse. Whoosh! A puff of white vapor slowly exhaled from Mu Chen's mouth. His face remained extremely serious. He then thrust both palms out, and black and white spiritual energy transformed into black and white spiritual light hands that moved as fast as lightning, reaching out to capture the emerald spirit fish that were drifting in the air. Buzz, buzz. Mu Chen clearly had his spiritual energy pushed to the extreme. The black and white spiritual light hands flashed, swiftly capturing one emerald spirit fish and suppressing it into submission. At the same time, from Wan Qingxian's position, a clear and loud phoenix cry echoed through the air. The area was bathed in golden light, and within the golden glow, a golden phoenix gracefully stretched its wings. Wan Qingxian was seated atop the golden phoenix. The golden phoenix spread its wings, and suddenly, golden feathers shot out. These feathers gathered together and turned into several small golden phoenixes. They flew out, leaving trails of golden light, and began to peck and swallow the emerald spirit fish in the air. Once the small golden phoenixes swallowed the spirit fish, they quickly returned, turning into golden feathers, and the golden phoenix erupted in brilliant light. This golden light lasted for about half an hour before gradually fading. When the golden light dissipated, Wan Qingxian's figure emerged. She gently clenched her jade hand, and 10 drops of supreme spiritual liquid hovered in her palm. In just half an hour, she had captured 10 drops of supreme spiritual liquid, an efficiency far surpassing Mu Chen's earlier performance. Wan Qingxian looked at the supreme spiritual liquid in her hand and nodded in satisfaction. She then shot a provocative glance at Mu Chen, as the light palms formed by his spiritual energy were clearly no match for the golden phoenix she had refined. Mu Chen also sensed Wan Qingxian's provocative gaze and smiled. He was equally surprised by her method, and he could feel some unique fluctuations from the golden phoenix. That fluctuation felt somewhat familiar to him. Buzz. As Mu Chen's gaze flickered, a clear sword hum suddenly echoed from the other side. He looked over to see Luo Li surrounded by an unmatched sword intent. The sword intent was formless and invisible, but there was a distinct and chilling wave of energy emanating. Buzz, buzz. The sword hum grew more urgent, and the Luo God sword in Luo Li's jade hand trembled slightly. The next moment, the sword shot into the sky, its sword light expanding and transforming into a sword river. After the sword river swallowed the supreme spiritual liquid, it coiled around Luo Li's body. Mu Chen could see that within the sword river, the Luo God sword emitted beams of sword light, constantly suppressing the rebellious drops of supreme spiritual liquid. Indeed, the Luo God sword was worthy of being called a true divine artifact. Its power far surpassed Mu Chen's imagination. Mu Chen had never truly seen the Luo God sword display its full divine might. However, he could sense that if the Luo God sword were to fully unleash its divine power, it would only be comparable to him if he completely unlocked all the seals of the Great Xun'er Demon Pillar. Otherwise, the Great Xun'er Demon Pillar would be difficult to resist. Thanks to the power of the Luo God sword, Luo Li's efficiency in suppressing the supreme spiritual liquid was remarkably fast. In less than half an hour, 10 drops of supreme spiritual liquid had been drawn out from the Sword River, quietly floating in front of her. Luo Li gently grasped them with her jade-like hand, storing the drops of supreme spiritual liquid. She then looked at Mu Chen and gave him a playful smile, pointing towards Wen Qingxian and mouthing the words, "Don't lose to her." Mu Chen helplessly shot her a glance. The little girl actually dared to gloat. However, it was time to use some tricks. Otherwise, he would really be left behind, and Wen Qingxian would definitely mock him later. Mu Chen took a deep breath, his black eyes becoming more focused. With a wave of his sleeve, the spiritual energy hand he had conjured dispersed. This method of capturing the supreme spiritual liquid was far too inefficient. It could never compare to Wen Qingxian and Luo Li's techniques. Mu Chen formed a series of seals with his hands, and his eyes slowly closed. The fluctuations of spiritual energy around him began to calm. Wen Qingxian and Luo Li noticed his movements and, while continuing to absorb the supreme spiritual liquid, they cast curious glances in his direction. Under their watchful eyes, a black glow suddenly appeared around Mu Chen's body. The glow grew more intense and began to coalesce behind him, gradually taking the shape of a tower. The tower shape became clearer and clearer until it transformed into a black floating pagoda, so solid it looked almost real. The pagoda's body was engraved with mysterious runes, each layer adorned with dragon-shaped inscriptions. The runes seemed vivid, with roaring dragons seemingly on the verge of breaking free from the tower. A unique suppressive force quietly spread from the pagoda, and the supreme spiritual liquid that had been floating around Mu Chen began to flee, as though it had been subjected to some kind of pressure. "What is this?" Wen Qingxian was slightly startled. It was clearly the first time she had seen Mu Chen use such a technique. The black pagoda made her feel a bit of pressure. Luo Li's beautiful eyes also brightened as she gazed at the black pagoda. It wasn't the first time she had seen this artifact, and she knew well the power it held. Back on the northern Song continent, outside Sacred Spirit Mountain, Mu Chen's mother had used the same floating pagoda to refine the Huanglong Supreme and his supreme body. That scene had left even the powerful figures from the northern Song continent speechless in awe. Though Mu Chen's pagoda was nowhere near as powerful as his mother's, it was by no means weak. The floating pagoda hovered behind Mu Chen, and the black light expanded. The beams of black light seemed to possess magical power. Any emerald spirit fish caught in the glow lost its ability to resist and was sucked into the pagoda. Once the emerald spirit fish were drawn into the pagoda, a dragon's roar echoed from its body. An ancient golden dragon emerged from the pagoda, transforming into a thin golden flame that rushed into the pagoda. The golden flame spread and enveloped the emerald spirit fish. Sizzle! The golden flames were extraordinarily terrifying. The Huanglong Supreme's supreme body had once been refined by the golden flames within the pagoda belonging to Mu Chen's mother. Therefore, in the face of these golden flames, the emerald spirit fish's resistance became feeble. In less than 20 minutes, several drops of supreme spiritual liquid floated within the pagoda. Mu Chen waved his hand, and the supreme spiritual liquid flew out, landing in his palm. Looking at the drops of supreme spiritual liquid in his hand, a smile appeared on Mu Chen's face. Ever since he had perfected the great pagoda art, the floating pagoda had grown even more powerful. Mu Chen put away the supreme spiritual liquid, then glanced at Wen Qingxian. The girl's beautiful face still held an expression of shock, clearly stunned by Mu Chen's speed. Humph! However, when she sensed Mu Chen's gaze, she let out a dismissive snort, turned her head, and ignored him. She focused on controlling the golden phoenix, pouring all her energy into taming the supreme spiritual liquid. Mu Chen couldn't help but smile when he saw that the proud girl had been subdued. He then winked at Luo Li. "You only bully girls." Luo Li rolled her eyes at him with a smile, and then refocused, starting to exert all her strength. Mu Chen smiled and shifted his gaze, also calming his mind. Right now, he needed to make the most of this opportunity to collect the supreme spiritual liquid. After all, places like this wouldn't be easy to come by again. The sheer amount of supreme spiritual liquid here could even attract numerous supreme powerhouses, even in the Great Thousand Worlds. At that time, It would no longer be just small skirmishes with MOU and the others. Since the opportunity was here, he needed to grasp it fully. The more supreme spiritual liquid he could collect now, the greater the benefits for his future cultivation. After all, advancing to the supreme level required a substantial amount of supreme spiritual liquid as a foundation. Boom, boom. As Chen focused his mind, the pagoda behind him began to emit dark beams of light, drawing in the emerald spirit fish one by one and sealing them within the tower, where they were suppressed and absorbed. Inside the ancient hall, the sound of spiritual energy surging echoed constantly. The Golden Phoenix, Sword River, and Black Tower each occupied a corner. As time passed, the emerald spirit fish were gradually transformed into supreme spiritual liquid, which was then collected by the three of them. It was clear that the three of them had become the biggest beneficiaries of this trip to the Spirit Treasury Hall. Time quickly passed in the hall. 3 dazzling beams of light occupied the 3 corners of the hall, and as they intertwined, powerful spiritual fluctuations radiated out. Under the cover of these 3 beams of light, the emerald spirit fish that had been drifting through the air were continuously captured, turning into drops of crystalline supreme spiritual liquid. Each drop exuded a potent spiritual power that was overwhelming. The 3 of them spent the better part of the day collecting the liquid. However, as more and more of the emerald spirit fish were captured, the green water pool at the center of the hall began to ripple slightly. Then, a strange pull emanated from the pool, causing the remaining emerald spirit fish in the air to flee into it. Splash! As they entered the pool, the fish's bodies quickly liquefied and merged into the water, disappearing without a trace. The hall fell quiet once again. With all the emerald spirit fish gone, the 3 beams of light gradually dissipated, revealing the figures of Chen and his companions. They exchanged confused glances, their eyes filled with reluctance, clearly still not satisfied with the amount they had collected. What happened? Chen frowned as he stared at the green water pool. All the supreme spiritual liquid was taken back. It seems that only a certain amount can be harvested here at a time. Luoli pondered. I'm not done yet. When Qingxian looked at the green water pool with displeasure and snorted coldly. If you're trying to stop me, then I'll take you as well. With that, she waved her hand, and countless golden feathers shot out like arrows, forming a spiritual lash aimed directly at the green water pool. Buzz! But as soon as the golden feathers touched the pool, they melted at an astonishing speed, and the golden light was absorbed into the pool, along with all the spiritual power it contained. Huh! When Qingxian exclaimed, her face becoming much more serious. She stared at the pool, her eyes flashing as she said in surprise, "This is a spiritual artifact?" Chen's heart shook upon hearing this. The pool that contained so much supreme spiritual liquid was actually a spiritual artifact? If they could take this artifact, wouldn't that mean they could truly acquire a massive amount of supreme spiritual liquid? Chen immediately leaped forward and landed on the edge of the green water pool, focusing his gaze. He soon noticed some faint, ancient characters within the pool. Is this? Chen stared at the ancient inscription, murmuring to himself, "Spirit Gathering Bowl? How is that possible?" Upon hearing the name, when Qingxian and Luo Li's faces instantly changed, and they quickly moved closer, their beautiful eyes filled with confusion and doubt. What's going on? What is this Spirit Gathering Bowl? Seeing the change in their expressions, Chen was also taken aback and asked, ignorant fool, when Qingxian said, in ancient times, there was a unique race in the Great Thousand Worlds called the Spirit Gathering Clan. They possessed extraordinary abilities, and the spirit artifacts they forged all had the effect of gathering spiritual energy. Among them, their pinnacle creation was the Spirit Gathering Bowl. When this bowl is fully activated, it can cover the entire world. Any spiritual energy absorbed by it will automatically transform into supreme spiritual liquid. Chen's expression instantly shifted. Transforming any spiritual energy into supreme spiritual liquid? Such a terrifying treasure still exists in this world? If that's the case, doesn't it mean that owning this item would be equivalent to having an endless supply of supreme spiritual liquid refined by countless supreme powerhouses without rest? If this is true, then such a spirit artifact is even more terrifying than a true divine artifact. In the Great Thousand Worlds, even the most powerful forces would likely fight over it. The value of the Spirit Gathering Bowl is beyond even my Luo God Sword, because it's not just a divine artifact, but an ancient sacred artifact, one level above divine artifacts, when Qingxian said softly, "Ancient sacred artifact?" The unfamiliar term brought a heavy feeling of oppression to Mu Chen. Such a being was beyond anything he could currently imagine. Does it really have such a grand history? Mu Chen was both astonished and troubled. If the Spirit Gathering Bowl was truly that powerful, it might be something he could never get his hands on. After all, just the rumor of its existence would ensure that he would never have peace. An innocent man with a priceless treasure is always in danger. Without absolute strength, treasures of this level were simply beyond Mu Chen's reach. However, the Spirit Gathering Bowl in front of us is definitely a fake. When Qingxian said firmly, "A fake?" Mu Chen was stunned. Yes, although the Wood Divine Temple is a large power, back in the ancient Great Thousand Worlds, it was far from being a top-tier force. Even on this relic continent, the Wood Divine Temple only ruled over a small corner. A sacred artifact like the Spirit Gathering Bowl is beyond their capabilities. Luo Li nodded lightly, explaining, "So, this Spirit Gathering Bowl in front of us is a counterfeit?" Mu Chen asked. "A fake that's still this impressive?" Mu Chen licked his lips. His previously restrained excitement started to rise again. If this Spirit Gathering Bowl were real, he wouldn't dare think about taking it now. He would simply remember it in his heart and wait until he was strong enough to take it. But since it's a fake, its value is much smaller, making it worth the risk. There are indeed many fakes of the Spirit Gathering Bowl in the Great Thousand Worlds. Some top-tier forces even possess them. So it's not that surprising that the Wood Divine Temple has one, Luo Li added. "So, shall we take it?" Mu Chen asked. At this point, he finally realized that the most valuable item in the Spirit Treasury Hall wasn't the supreme spiritual liquid, but the counterfeit Spirit Gathering Bowl in front of them. When Qingxian and Luo Li exchanged a glance, both nodding. Even though their backgrounds were formidable, they couldn't help but feel a bit tempted by the Spirit Gathering Bowl. After all, the supreme spiritual liquid they had collected earlier was only a tiny fraction compared to what the Spirit Gathering Bowl could store. Mu Chen's palm exuded a powerful surge of spiritual energy, which quickly wrapped around the Spirit Gathering Bowl-shaped pool. However, as soon as the energy came close to the Spirit Gathering Bowl, a tremendous suction force erupted from within, instantly devouring the spiritual energy. Mu Chen's body trembled slightly, his expression growing serious. The Spirit Gathering Bowl automatically absorbs any nearby spiritual energy. "I don't think we have the ability to take it," Luo Li said helplessly. When Qingxian sighed regretfully, the treasure was right in front of them, but they couldn't take it. It was truly frustrating. Mu Chen frowned in deep thought. His gaze flickered as he suddenly had an idea. After a moment, his expression shifted, and the ancient tree mark on his forehead slowly appeared again. Earlier, the Hall Spirit said I was the successor. Since I'm the successor, I should have the right to inherit anything here. Mu Chen pointed to the ancient tree mark on his forehead. Luo Li and Qingxian nodded. Since they had no other options, there was no harm in letting Mu Chen give it a try. Mu Chen focused his gaze, and the ancient tree mark on his forehead began to flicker with a faint glow. After a moment, a green light suddenly shot out from within the mark, spreading out and enveloping the green water pool in front of him. Buzzing. As the green light surrounded the pool, the still water began to ripple faintly. Soft glows emitted from the water's surface. Seeing this, Luo Li and Qingxian were both overjoyed. It really works. The light in the pool grew increasingly intense. After a while, the pool, which was several yards wide, began to slowly shrink. After a few minutes, the pool transformed into an ancient green jade bowl, which swayed and floated towards Mu Chen's outstretched hand, finally landing gently in his palm. The gazes of Mu Chen, Luo Li, and Qingxian all focused on it at that moment. The ancient jade bowl quietly rested in Mu Chen's palm. Around the bowl, complex patterns were visible. Some of these patterns were crimson, because it was said that in the creation of the Spirit Gathering Bowl, in addition to rare materials, the blood of the Spirit Gathering clan was also an essential ingredient. Inside the jade bowl, it appeared as if a thin liquid was gently swaying, yet it could never escape the mouth of the bowl. Quick, see how much supreme spiritual liquid is inside. When Qingxian urged impatiently, Mu Chen nodded. As his mind moved, he intended to inspect the contents of the Spirit Gathering Bowl. However, as he tried, the bowl emitted a green glow, completely blocking his detection. At the same time, a thin light barrier appeared around the bowl's mouth, within which an ancient rune seal could be seen. Mu Chen's expression stiffened. "This Spirit Gathering Bowl is sealed," Mu Chen said with a bitter smile. "I'll give it a try," when Qingxian said skeptically. Reaching out, she took the Spirit Gathering Bowl, and upon activating her spiritual energy, she found that she couldn't detect anything within the bowl, nor could she extract the supreme spiritual liquid. The thin light barrier had incredibly strong defensive powers. The seal was something they couldn't break. Damn it! When Qingxian cursed angrily, then threw the bowl back at Mu Chen, saying, "You're lucky." Mu Chen awkwardly scratched his head, then clenched his hand, causing a jade bottle to appear in his palm. The bottle was crystal clear, with drops of glowing liquid floating inside. Earlier, I collected a total of 124 drops of supreme spiritual liquid. How about I give it all to you? He knew how valuable the Spirit Gathering Bowl was, and that its worth far exceeded the 124 drops of supreme spiritual liquid. However, he didn't really want to keep it all for himself. "Forget it, you're the one who got it. I don't want it," when Qingxian said, pouting. "But the Spirit Gathering Bowl is yours, and the supreme spiritual liquid inside belongs to both me and Luoli. Remember, you'll need to double the amount and return it later." Although when Qingxian often teased Mu Chen with her sharp words, it was clear she had a soft heart. "Thanks. I'll consider it a favor I owe you," Mu Chen said seriously. Given Luoli and Wen Qingxuan's background, perhaps this counterfeit Spirit Gathering Bowl wasn't something they would find hard to part with, but for Mu Chen, who had no strong backing, it was truly an important item. "Don't worry, though your favor isn't worth much, I'll remember it," when Qingxian said with a smirk, her lips curling up. Mu Chen smiled and then looked at Luoli. She returned a gentle smile, clearly showing that there was no need for them to distinguish too much between each other. "Let's go. It's getting late, and Su Huang and the others must be getting anxious," Luoli said softly. Hearing this, Mu Chen also smiled and nodded. Now that they had the Spirit Gathering Bowl, there was no reason to stay any longer. "Let's go." With a wave of his hand, Mu Chen turned and left without hesitation. Luoli and Wan Qingxian quickly followed behind. As the three of them departed, the gate to the Spirit Treasury Hall slowly closed again, returning to its timeless, silent state. The forces of the Alliance of Academies had long since withdrawn, so there were no further obstructions along the way. With the three of them now able to use their spiritual power, it took them only about 10 minutes to pass through the thorny ironwood forest and exit the shadowy area. As they stepped out of the shadow formed by the thorny ironwood trees, they immediately felt their previously heavy bodies become light. The spiritual energy that had been sluggish inside them surged again, and as they circulated it, a powerful force filled their limbs and bones. Ah! When the power returned, the three of them let out a collective sigh of relief. That suppressed feeling, when their spiritual power couldn't flow, had been truly stifling. "This feels wonderful." When Qingxian exhaled softly, her bright eyes gazing at the clear skies. Only after experiencing the inability to use spiritual power could one truly appreciate how intoxicating it was to feel spiritual energy flowing freely in the world. No need to be like this. In the Spirit Road, you can't feel your spiritual energy for a whole year or more, Mu Chen chuckled. It's precisely because we've been in the Spirit Road for so long that we've become numb, forgetting what it feels like to have spiritual power, when Qingxian smiled faintly. Mu Chen nodded in agreement, then suddenly his expression changed. He raised his head and looked toward the distance, and noticed that in this area, a sudden surge of spiritual energy fluctuations appeared. His eyes narrowed as he observed the figures in the distance. It looked like several teams, and these teams were all staring at them. Their gazes were filled with intense greed and heat. What's going on? Luo Li also noticed the scene and immediately furrowed her brow. Her delicate hand tightly gripped the Luo god sword, sensing something was wrong. When Qing Xin let out a soft snort, and in her hand, the golden war spear gleamed with light. Her cold gaze swept across, and anyone who met her eyes couldn't help but avert their gaze. Whoosh! Not far away, the sound of wind cutting through the air reached them. Mu Chen and the others looked toward the source and saw several figures speeding toward them. It was Su Huang and the others, who had been waiting for them outside the thorny forest. When Su Huang and the others saw that Mu Chen and his group had made it out safely, they also sighed in relief. "You guys are finally out," Su Huang said. "What's going on?" Mu Chen glanced around at the activity and asked. When they had entered earlier, there hadn't been so many people here. About half a day ago, the forces of the Alliance of Academies suddenly fled from the inside. Su Huang looked at the three of them with surprise. "Did you guys drive them out?" Mu Chen nodded. "Unbelievable." Su Huang and the others were speechless. They had seen the forces of the Alliance of Academies, nearly 200 strong, each one a body-refining expert. Inside the thorny ironwood forest, where they couldn't use their spiritual power, it would have been extremely difficult to deal with them. Yet despite all that, they had still been chased out by Mu Chen and his group, just like stray dogs. After they fled, I saw their faces were grim, so we hid for a while. Then they started spreading the word, Su Huang said helplessly. They claim there's a spirit treasury hall in this thorny forest, and inside it's been storing the supreme spiritual liquid from the Divine Wood Temple for countless years. They say there are at least tens of thousands of drops. Mu Chen's brows furrowed. The Alliance of Academies was indeed devious. Seeing they couldn't get their hands on the treasures in the Spirit Treasury Hall, they were trying to spread this news, hoping to cause unrest. Tens of thousands of drops of supreme spiritual liquid. These people certainly had big ambitions. But Mu Chen knew that once such a rumor spread, regardless of whether it was true or not, it would bring a lot of trouble. After all, the value of supreme spiritual liquid was well known. If it really amounted to tens of thousands of drops, not only would people like them be tempted, but even supreme powerhouses would be envious. Many supreme powerhouses might not even have that much in their collections. Tens of thousands of drops of supreme spiritual liquid were enough to make a supreme powerhouse wealthy. And they also said that all the supreme spiritual liquid from the Spirit Treasury Hall has already fallen into your hands. Su Huang smiled wryly. Now, those teams eyeing you are all coming for you. Just some insignificant fools. If they really have the ability, they can come and try to take it. If they win, I'll give them all the supreme spiritual liquid in my hand, but I'm afraid they'll choke to death. When Qing Xuan's beautiful, delicate face flashed with a hint of coldness as she snorted. Su Huang chuckled awkwardly, thinking to himself, no wonder she was once number one on the score ranking. Such domineering confidence. While Mu Chen and Su Huang were talking in the distance, nearly 10 figures suddenly rose from the dense mass of people. When they reached a distance of several hundred zhang, they stopped. These 10 figures were surrounded by powerful spiritual energy fluctuations, all having reached the spiritual energy tribulation level. Clearly, they were the leaders of some strong teams. Behind them, there were dozens of teams, all vigilantly watching Mu Chen and his group. Captain Mu Chen, I am Chun'er, from Lingya Academy. The leader of the group was a young man dressed in blue. His face was handsome, but his eyes were full of greed. Mu Chen glanced at him indifferently, but didn't respond. He turned to Su Huang and the others, saying, let's go. Wait. Seeing that Mu Chen completely ignored him, Chun'er's expression changed, a trace of anger flashing in his eyes. He spoke in a low voice, Captain Mu Chen, I know you're strong, but there are hundreds of teams here waiting for you. If it comes to a fight, it might not be easy for you either. What do you want? Mu Chen finally looked at him, his tone indifferent. As long as Captain Mu Chen gives us 10 drops of the supreme spiritual liquid each, we won't cause you any trouble. Chenya said quickly when he heard Mu Chen's response. 10 drops of supreme spiritual liquid? Who do you think you are? When Qing Xuan's face turned icy as she spoke coldly, she took a step forward, her jade hand gripping the golden war spear. A dazzling golden light erupted, immediately spreading a terrifying spiritual pressure. Under that immense pressure, Xun'er and his team couldn't help but change their expressions, a hint of fear creeping into their eyes. Divine Soul Tribulation? When Xingqian has indeed broken through to the Divine Soul Tribulation. Impressive. No wonder she was #1 on the score ranking. Feeling the immense pressure from Wen Xingqian, the teams that had been eyeing them also showed signs of fear, their expressions changing as they looked at her. Everyone, don't be afraid. We have the advantage in numbers. Even if she's in the Divine Soul Tribulation, we can still defeat her together. Xun'er, seeing the fear in the eyes of his companions, quickly shouted. He knew that without the advantage of numbers, they wouldn't dare to block Mu Chen, Wen Xingqian, or Luoli. You're a bunch of clueless fools. When Qingxuan's beautiful eyes were filled with coldness, just as she was about to take action, she saw Mu Chen smile slightly and wave his hand. A streak of light shot out from his palm, then grew rapidly into a giant greenwood statue, the Divine Wood Guard. Take him down. Mu Chen pointed at Xun'er, smiling coldly. Boom. The Divine Wood Guard stomped its foot, and its massive body shot forward. Its shadow immediately covered Xun'er. Seeing the shadow descending, Xun'er's face changed drastically. He poured all his spiritual energy into an attack, transforming it into a powerful lash that shot toward the Divine Wood Guard. The Divine Wood Guard swung its giant fist, shattering the lash and smashing its fist into Xun'er's body. Boom! A deep sound echoed as Xun'er's body was sent flying like a cannonball, crashing violently into the ground. The earth collapsed beneath him, creating a deep pit. Xun'er lay in the pit, blood flowing, his life unknown. You dare? The 9 experts from the spiritual energy tribulation level, who had accompanied Xun'er, changed their expressions as they yelled out. Whoosh! Before their shout could even fade, golden light rushed toward them. When Qingxuan's graceful figure appeared in front of them, followed by a barrage of deadly spear shadows. Swish! Swish! The spear shadows flew by, and 3 of the spiritual energy tribulation experts were instantly torn apart, blood pouring from their bodies as they fell. Buzz! At the same time, a clear sword cry rang out, and a sword river surged forward, carrying with it a streak of fresh blood. 3 more experts from the spiritual energy tribulation level staggered back in horror, their arms bleeding profusely. Boom! Mu Chen's figure also appeared before the last 3 masters of the spiritual energy tribulation. Black thunderlight flickered wildly as he coldly swung his fist. The air exploded beneath his punch, and the shadow of his fist, like a thunderclap, landed directly on the chests of the 3 men. A deep rumble echoed, and the chests of the 3 collapsed inward. With a final scream, they were sent flying backward, deeply embedded into the mountain. At that moment, the entire area fell silent. The 10 masters of the spiritual energy tribulation were nearly wiped out in an instant by Mu Chen and his companions with just one exchange. The thunderous force was so overwhelming that even the watching teams in the distance didn't have time to react. Mu Chen stood in the air, expressionless, and clapped his hands. He then looked at the dark mass of teams and casually said, "Who else?" He knew the intentions of the Alliance of Academies, so he didn't choose to avoid confrontation. He understood that in such situations, avoiding only leads to more trouble, as more and more forces would gather. It was better to strike directly, displaying enough power to intimidate. Only then could he crush the greed within their hearts. Faced with Mu Chen's indifferent tone, the momentum of the hundreds of teams ahead faltered. Fear surged in some eyes, and for a moment, no one dared to speak. In the sky, Mu Chen, Luoli, and Wen Xingqian stood in midair. Behind them stood the massive Divine Wood Guard. The visual impact was so powerful that no one dared to resist. At that moment, they realized just how vast the gap was between them and the 3 individuals before them. Although they held a clear numerical advantage, they were no match for them. Anyone who covets our supreme spiritual liquid can come forward and try. But I must warn you first, while killing someone may cause some trouble, I have plenty of ways to make you stay here crippled. Mu Chen's indifferent voice echoed through the sky, carrying a chilling coldness. Everyone fell silent, shivering in fear. Chen coldly glanced at them, then his gaze swept around. His icy voice rang out again. As for the rats of the Alliance of Academies, this cheap trick is too low grade. You'd be better off handling it yourselves next time. With that, he waved his sleeve, retracting the divine wood guard. His figure moved, speeding toward the distance. Luoli, Wen Qingxian, Su Huang, and the others immediately followed. This time, no one dared to stop them, and they could only watch as the group departed unscathed. As Chen and his companions left, the teams gathered here let out a powerless sigh. They exchanged glances and, with a sense of defeat, scattered. They had underestimated these two teams. In a hidden mountain somewhere in the area, Mou and the others looked at Chen and the group leaving unscathed, their faces ashen. Finally, Mou stomped his foot fiercely, his cold voice echoing through the forest. Chen, don't get too smug.